Welcome to the Office of Institutional Research and Planning. This presentation will provide a brief overview of the results of our freshman to sophomore retention rate analysis, which we completed in the spring of 2017. We conducted this research in order to examine a key question facing UW-Whitewater, namely, what factors impact the likelihood that a student will decide to leave UW-Whitewater before completing a degree. Both academic success and financial aid are assumed to influence a student's interest in and ability to return for a second year. At UW-Whitewater, there is particular concern that certain populations of students may be experiencing higher attrition rates, particularly URM, low-income, and first-generation students. In order to augment our understanding of retention at UW-Whitewater, the Office of Institutional Research and Planning undertook a statistical analysis of the factors influencing retention. We examined 5 years of data, starting with the fall 2011 cohort and ending with the fall 2015 cohort of first-time full-time undergraduate students. In our model, the dependent variable is a binary indicator of whether a student returned to UW-Whitewater in his or her second year. Since there was a variety of theoretical and anecdotal evidence suggesting that certain factors might drive attrition at UW-Whitewater, we considered 41 independent and control variables in our models. Our models included not only a number of demographic variables, but also information on a student's academic preparedness for college and the student's situation in his or her first semester at UW-Whitewater. We also included several financial aid variables. Since individual grants were not a good predictor of retention, we used the student's total financial aid package as our financial aid measure in the final models. We ran our model several times, with various iterations of all of these variables. The following graphs provide a visual representation of the most significant aspects of our results. In these graphs, the y-axis indicates the likelihood of being retained in the second year, while the x-axis represents the scale of the factor being examined. Here, the upward-sloping line in this graph highlights the positive association between a student's first semester GPA at UW-Whitewater and his or her likelihood of being retained. Please note the way in which observations are clustered above a GPA of 2.25. In contrast, the downward-sloping line in this graph indicates that students who live farther from Whitewater are less likely to be retained. The more gradual slope of the trend line in this graph reflects the fact that financial aid packages can vary significantly. That said, retention increases consistently in conjunction with increases in the size of financial aid packages. As this slide demonstrates, being a first-generation student negatively impacts a student's likelihood of being retained. While statistically significant, the difference in the likelihood of retention is not large in substantive terms. While there is also negative correlation between URM status and retention, this relationship was not statistically significant in the multiple models we tested. Our analysis also investigated whether attrition was influenced by a student's course of study. As this graph indicates, failure to declare a major in the first term of one's freshman year is a consistent predictor of attrition across most models. There are two preliminary conclusions that can be drawn from this analysis. Firstly, the strongest predictors of retention are A. Academic achievement in the first semester, B. The proximity of UW-Whitewater to home, and C. The size of the student's financial aid package. In other words, stronger first-semester GPAs and larger financial aid packages are positively associated with a greater likelihood of retention. However, as the distance between a student's home and UW-Whitewater increases, the likelihood that he or she will be retained into his or her second year correspondingly decreases. Secondly, demographic indicators, academic preparedness, and experiences in the first semester are much less consistently statistically significant in our models than the above-mentioned factors. In particular, lower family income and/or URM status are both negatively correlated with retention. However, these variables rarely achieve significance in our models. This suggests that URM status and family income, in and of themselves, are not the primary factors determining whether students return to UW-Whitewater in their second year. Although high school GPA makes a small positive contribution to the model, it does not appear that academic preparedness plays a decisive role in determining student retention. Lastly, while first-generation status appears to be a more consistent predictor of attrition than other demographic indicators, it makes a much smaller and less consistent contribution to the models than the stronger predictors mentioned above. We hope you have found this presentation helpful. If you have more questions about this presentation or this analysis more generally, please feel free to contact us.